Good evening, friends. I welcome all to this 11th knowledge sharing session of Deciphering the IBC Ordinance 2020 and Path Ahead for Creditors. As you are aware that we are organizing programs on topical interest and we are planning to give updation on the basis of what is new coming in the market, so we can solve the problem of the corporate world by solving their questions, their issues through our question and answer session. This program is also aimed to do the same. And today we have invited a very learned speaker, Mr. P.N. Prasad, who is a ex-managing director of deputy managing director of bank. He joined as a probationary officer in State Bank in 1983, and then he has rose up to the position of deputy managing director of bank. He has 37 years of experience. Recently, on 31st May, he retired from the bank. He has done work in various departments: commercial client group, corporate banking verticals, project finance, structuring of SBU, and various other things. He has worked in various positions in the bank, from branch manager to the top level executive. He has various positions in the bank and work in various states of the country. Mr. Prasad has a very rich experience in corporate and international banking, project finance, debt syndication, stress asset, and risk management and trade finance. He has represented banks in various positions. He was also the bank nominee director of HDFC Venture Capital and Oman India Joint Venture Investment Fund. Above all, he is my senior and alumni of St. John's College, Agra, where we have studied. And then we have Mr. Manoj Kumar, who is a partner in corporate professional, who is the in charge of insolvency and the M&A and takeover division. He has handled more than 500 M&A transactions, written books on corporate insolvency. He has written various articles. He has a record of giving comments on insolvency law in the newspaper, maximum by anybody in the country. And Manoj has a ripe and rich experience on various aspects of corporate world. Then we have a with us, Karan Gandhi, who is a lawyer and the company secretary, who is a member of Bar Council of India and Delhi Bar Association. He works in corporate litigation, M&A, and insolvency practice. Is assisting corporate debtors, financial creditors, operational creditor, and IRP. He has written various articles, and he was the co-author of insolvency book of corporate professional. So these are the three learned speakers will discuss about today's program. And before starting this program, I'm giving some feedback and my introductory remark. Friends, as you are aware, India ranking was 150 few years back, which has reached to 63. And when we were 150 plus, the biggest drawback was that our recovery procedure was very ineffective, lengthy, and time consuming. As you are aware, when business is in red, it is worse than the perishable commodity. Come to 1st December 2016, a game changer law came in the name of insolvency law. And with this law, it was transparent and market driven. It aimed faster resolution of stress business, maximize asset valuation of realization. Company is solvent, then shareholders is the owner or controlling the business. When the company is insolvent, the creditor for controlling the company. That concept this law brought out. it was not a recovery tool, but people have used, and corporate world has used as a effective recovery tool, and it was very successful also. People have a corporate world has a fear of losing business. That's why they were settling. I remember Mr. Sahu has written the forward. Mr. M.S. Sahu, who is the chairman of Insolvency Board, has written the forward of our book, and he mentioned this in our book, that best use of the law is not to use this law. And then he mentioned 2-3 other things also. The code has to stay focused on the preventive, that you have to be more preventive than you have to implement it. Maximize market mechanism, facilitate creative disruption. These are the points he has mentioned. And as you are aware that till today there were 24,000 cases was filed, and out of half the cases are settled out of the court. On 31st March 2020, there are 3,774 cases admitted, 221 resolved, 914 ordered for liquidation, 157 withdraw, 312 under litigation, and 2170 is pending. So you can understand that what is the good performance of this law. It is not only this law, but they have planned also the futuristic law of insolvency, and the IBVI by working on pre-packaged insolvency, where management of insolvent company, lender jointly negotiate and make the resolution deal and get it approved from the adjudication, that is NCLT. So that is a pre-packed insolvency plan is going on, and if it is coming, then out of court settlement will take more and more in this country. Then because of WTO pressure and the mandate, cross-border insolvency, where common insolvency framework is there, that is also going on, and it will be recently come in a big way. Then another aspects of group insolvency to resolve a stress group of companies under single window system is also going on. A special insolvency provision for MSME, that is also they are planning, because they are thinking that MSME should not be treated that hard that they are giving to all the companies. And I am hopeful that these effective tools will definitely reduce bank NPA, and it will bring better financial discipline in corporate world. How they will reduce the NPA, that Mr. Prashad will discuss in his presentation. Now, friends, as you are aware, this is going on, and this was the future plan of Insolvency Board. Suddenly came the Corona, COVID-19. Everything has changed. Everything has changed, mean everything. Your life, my life, banking life, creditor's life, regulator life, everything has changed. And that's why the insolvency law, which was very effective tool for financial discipline, it has to change also, because now the work and the world is changing, corporate world is changing. That's why the government brought out the ordinance of 2020. Now there they have increased the amount of insolvency, which was 1 lakh rupees to, they have done the 1 crore. And then they have suspended insolvency law from 25th March for 6 months, which can extend to up to next 6 months, which we are expecting it will be extended. And then they have changed one, that 10% of home buyer or any person who is coming in, those who are in number, they must be 10%, not the 1 lakh rupees which are earlier. These other law has changed. So the question is, at present today, no insolvency. So the question is, it means I can't file any insolvency. That question Manoj will discuss. How and who can file? Whether we have cases, because this insolvency suspended, can you file? Yes, there is a cases where you can file. That Manoj will explain. Now, second is, if there's no insolvency, then what is the alternative route? Where the bankers will go, where the creditors will go, where the operational creditor will go, which they were using. So now the question is whether we will go to the old route or we have to bring out something new. So a scheme of arrangement with creditors, that was a part of the Companies Act, that will come into picture. SARFAESI Act, which is alive and which was bank was using, that will come again in a big way. Summary suits and recovery suit will come into picture. Section 138 cases were there. People were not filing 138 cases, but they were going to insolvency route. That will come back. MSME has separate law and separate recovery process and separate protection. That will come. Now today all home buyers were rushing to insolvency and they were getting a faster remedy. Now they will go to RERA. So these were the things will come, and then some new thing has come, like 7th June circular or intercredit agreement, that ICA has also come into picture, and Mr. Prashad will explain that in detail, that what is this agreement of creditors, and that will how this can help the banks. So in a way, the entire structure is before us as an insolvency law. Now that structure is out. So what is there? These are the points which I have told. So today's we are discussing all these aspects. Manoj will discuss that what is the insolvency law, what is 2020 ordinance, how this amendment has brought out, and what are the position and how we can go. And the Karan will discuss about the alternative recovery mechanism. Then Mr. Prashad will discuss about his vast experience of 37 years in banking sector. He will discuss about what are the alternative routes the banks will follow and banks has, and they will take care. And he will guide us some interesting case studies which he has seen this. This is the structure of the program, and after that we can ask the question answer. So anybody has any question, please send it to us. We will keep it ready, and after the presentation we will ask questions with the all three panelists, and after last 10 to 15 minutes we will have rapid round. So more questions which we are receiving, we have received around 35 to 50 questions that we will try to cover. So this is overall things, what after insolvency ordinance, how to handle it, what are the remedy, and what the corporate world will face from the banking sector. Thank you very much. Over to Manoj for your presentation on this new law of insolvency which has changed. So please take care how we can move on. Manoj.
Thank you, sir. To start with, as I think we all are well aware about the law of insolvency law, which has come in 2016 December. So this was a game-changing situation when before that the insolvency resolution was mainly through some private arrangements under the RBI norms like CDR, then SDR, then S4A, and then there were certain other private arrangements also. And besides that, there was a Sikh Industrial Companies Act under which BIFR were the mechanism overseeing body which was helping in resolution of stressed companies. But it was felt that this is not very effective tool for insolvency resolution. In most of the cases, the matter dragged on for years, and then that was causing loss in the value of assets, and there was no effective resolution. So besides having the WTO need of to incorporating a new insolvency framework, this was also a challenge, and that is why the government came out with this game-changing law, which is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of India. It is not yet fully operational, but only the corporate side of this law is operational. But since beginning, it became very effective and very useful tool for corporates and bankers and lenders as well as creditors. as sir has rightly said, the intent was to provide a mechanism for resolution of insolvency and not make it as a tool for recovery. However, slowly and gradually, it became a very good and effective tool for recovery. Many of the there are hundreds of cases which got resolved even before going into admission stage. Similarly, there are hundreds of other cases which got resolved after admission, but before some proper actions have started. So all these things has happened, and government has time to time intervened and modified the law. IBBI, which is the regulatory body, has also very proactively changed the law whenever it was required. Now the situation has changed, and now because of the COVID, most of the companies are under financial stress. So government thought it proper to bring an ordinance and make some modification in the law, so that the companies which are already under stress due to this pandemic should not be made to face this insolvency situation right now. Now we are discussing those things. So as I discussed, the object was to maximize the asset value and prompt resolution. The total timeline is given is 180 days plus 90 days additionally. And later on, they have said that because of litigations, many of the matters were going much beyond that. So they have restricted the overall timeline, including litigation, to 330 days. So, and the data shows that till March 221 cases got resolved, and around 900 went through liquidation stage. So when the resolution could not happen in those cases. So even in case of liquidation, the realization of the asset value happens faster under this law, and hence it became a very effective tool. Now, what happened due to COVID? So COVID related, there were three major changes. The first change came as a intervention by the central government. The central government has already got a power to increase the threshold or eligibility criteria, and that was earlier 1 lakh, but they drastically changed it to 1 crore because they found that below that there were thousands of cases which were just recovery cases, and they were going to insolvency and coming back from that even without resolution. So they thought it better not to allow those cases to go to insolvency. Second, later on, the government has brought an ordinance to modify the law, the code, and mainly two major changes have been made. One change is they have said that no fresh insolvency can be initiated for a default starting with effect from 25th of March 2020, which is the date when the first lockdown happened. So if the default and this suspension of new cases would remain for 6 months and it may be extended further up to 1 year. This is the provision of under section 10A of the new ordinance. Further, it is also clarified that the default made during this period, that is the 6 months or 1 year, whatever it may be, from the 25th of March, will be totally exempt from this law, and no application can ever be filed for a default under made during this period. Second, they have also given a protection to the management and the directors that in case there is a transaction which fall under the category of fraudulent transaction or wrongful trading in the business of the company, and when the company is get admitted into insolvency, the IRP or resolution professional find it out, and they can sue the old management under section 66 of the code. So they have given the protection to the management if these defaults happen between this 6 month period, during this 6 month period. So these are the three major changes happened due to COVID. So what is the impact? The impact is, the basic aim was to bring positivity, because the companies are already under stress. The government has already, and the RBI has also given various relief packages for the purpose of bringing positivity, but the threat of insolvency was big, so they have given this protection. Then no fresh proceeding, and this will be for the whole period. default happened during this period, it will go on. No new insolvency can be brought in for default made during this period. And then for wrongful trading also, there is a protection to the directors and the promoters of the company. Then what will happen? What will happen if there is no case? What will be the situation? So here are various type of situations. When first one, where the demand notice has already been issued by the operational creditor prior to 25th of March. So though the law is not settled, but the primary view can be that Section 8 is the trigger point. Section 8, which says that any operational creditor, if they want to bring in the insolvency proceeding against the company, they have to give a prior notice of 10 days of default. So that means the default has already been already happened, and if the default has already happened and for that notice has already been given by to the company, then this is a fit case for insolvency admission, in my opinion. Then there may be a second situation where application under court has been filed, but it is not yet listed before any NCLT benches, or no admission has happened. So I think that is also a fit case, because the protection is only for those cases which has where the default happened on or after 25th of March. The another question is what will be the threshold? So the threshold of 1 crore happened on 24th of March 2020. So if the application has already been filed before 24th of March, then this will not be there will be no restriction to on NCLT to admit those cases. Then third one is where the notice has been issued against the corporate debtor by the NCLT. That is also a similar situation, and it should be admitted. All other cases like pronouncement is stuck or all these things. So all those cases which are already somewhere in the pipeline should be validly admitted or considered by the NCLT, because the default period is before this exemption period, and also the threshold is not a retrospective, it is prospective. So on the date of when default happened, and application was made, then the amount of 1 crore should be there. Now the practical issue is whether the NCLT is functional. Yes, NCLT is functional, but they are not admitting or taking any new cases, and only considering a limited number of cases because of the COVID. It is difficult for the members and of the NCLT to attend the cases, so they are taking limited number of cases which are urgent, which are there for urgent hearing. Then certain recent judgment has come even after the ordinance, like one in POSECO India case, where Kolkata bench of NCLT has held that the increased threshold is not retrospective, it is prospective. Hence, if the case is already filed, then the case must be admitted. Then another case, which is very important case, is the Dixam shooting and sorting company. So here the NCLT has taken a very drastic view and said that even in this case the resolution plan was already approved, but the resolution applicant wanted certain additional time to make payment because of the COVID, and they have said that this is a genuine difficulty of the resolution applicant and allowed certain additional time period to make the payments. Then one case which is a bit unique is BMA Enterprises case, in which case the matter was already filed and company is an MSME. NCLT admitted the case under insolvency because it was default was before 24th of March, when the threshold was increased, and when 25th March, which is the date from which protection has been given. However, the promoters of the company went to the High Court under writ jurisdiction, and under writ jurisdiction, in the interim first hearing, interim protection has been given to the company. The High Court said that the NCLT should not have admitted the case, and but not the final view has not come, and they have given the protection till the time the final judgment of the High Court. Company can continue as a going concern without initiation of the insolvency process. So another thing, if that is not happening, what are the other mechanisms? So as I discussed before insolvency, there were certain RBI circulars for resolution of stressed companies. Like earlier it was corporate debt restructuring, CDR. Then they came with the SDR mechanism. Then they came with S4A. And all these mechanisms were there. Then they replaced all these when the insolvency law was there to a new prudential framework for resolution. So now in existence, this framework is in existence. So what is the whole framework is all about? I think Mr. Prasad will give more detail and the banker's perspective in this. But what is the broader framework? It is saying that early detection of the stress should happen. So as soon as there is a default, the companies, the bank and lenders are mandated to categorize those assets as a SMA, a special mention account. And SMA 0, 1, 2, and 3 happens after every 30 days. And it has to happen in all cases where the amount of total exposure is 5 crore or more, so 50 million rupees or more, right? If that is the case, then they have provided this circular provides that if the lenders must review the case, each of the case, and if the within 30 days of the stress, and if they decide to resolve the insolvency, then they have to enter into a joint creditors agreement where all the creditors would agree that if any resolution plan is approved by 75% of the majority, then it will be binding on all. So that there is no litigation at a later date. Then second thing is the resolution plans must be approved and implemented within 180 days from the reference date. And lenders have choice. If they think that it is not going to be resolved, then they can go for insolvency resolution. Or if ICA is not happening, then any of the banker who has security may invoke SARFAESI actions like taking over the assets or business of any factory assets of the company and settle their own debt. Then the RBI has power under Section 35AA of RBI Act, Banking Regulation Act, to direct any company, any bank to take a company to insolvency resolution. Another situation is if the central government authorized RBI, or it is a special class of company, like in case of banking finance company which are governed by RBI, or any special company which are regulated by other regulator like SEBI, then on the direction of RBI they can be admitted. So these are the broad framework which is in existence. All other things, traditional recovery mechanism like suit for recovery or other mechanisms are also available, which can be used, and that will be discussed in detail by my colleague Karan Gandhi. So that is all from my side. Right, over to Karan now. Thank you.
Karan, अपना वीडियो खोल के you just discuss.
Please. Good evening, everyone. This is Karan Gandhi. I'm working with corporate professionals as a principal associate. I have been involved in the IBC and recovery mechanisms which are available to our clients. Now, after my co-panelist, Mr. Manoj Kumar, has already discussed what has happened in the IBC, and there have been few amendments. First of all, related to the enhancement of the minimum default amount, which practically has rendered certain of the operational creditors who generally used to have a claim of a smaller amount than 1 crore, limited with the options which are related to the traditional recovery methods. However, I won't say that these are the only methods which were prevalent prior to the insolvency and bankruptcy code, because there are alternate methods, there are new laws, because after some time RERA came into picture. MSME also found their alternate recovery mechanism through e-Samadhan portal, which was introduced by Modi government of late. And apart from that, there are other methods of recovery. However, I have in the present presentation, I have covered certain methods which are, to my mind, presently involved, especially with the operational creditors, and the other form of creditors who are having certain like checks in their hands through which they can seek the recoveries. So moving on to the first slide, just yes. So these are the methods which are available for the recoveries with the creditors. Now, the first method which I would like to highlight is the scheme of arrangement. Now, that is not particularly for the creditors to avail the recovery. However, we have catered it in a sense that it is available for the promoters who can enter into the scheme of arrangement, the corporate debtors, because it is not only section 7 or 9 which has been suspended during this COVID era, but yes, it's a section 10 where the corporate debtor also had an opportunity to approach the NCLT for its defaults. So the first point which we'll be discussing is the scheme of arrangement and how it can be fruitful for the creditors. The another point is securitization, the SARFAESI Act, which is available to the lenders who are having the security in their favor. The third point is RERA, the home buyers who are experiencing some default on account of the builders who are supposed to provide them a timely possession of their units which they have booked for residential or investment purposes. What are the remedies available there with them under RERA? Another point which we'll be discussing is for the recovery mechanism available with the MSMEs. Of course, it was very much easier under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code when the default amount was minimum as 1 lakh. In fact, we have already witnessed that there were petitions which were settled or admitted with the default amount of 1 or 2 lakhs, and even the NCLT had initially in their initial order had directed the applicant to bear the cost towards the CIRP process to an amount of 2 lakhs. So having said that, moving on to next topic, it will be a Negotiable Instrument Act 1881, where we'll be discussing filing of a complaint under section 138, and thereafter we'll be coming to the summary suit and recovery suit in the form of the presentation which will flow. Moving on to the first slide of my presentation, I would like to discuss the scheme of arrangement under section 230 to 234 of the Companies Act 2013. Now, this method was also previously available, and there had been instances where the companies have entered into a scheme of arrangement with their creditors. Now, this scheme primarily is moved on to by the promoters of the company who per se want to either amalgamate or merger happens. However, this scheme can also be availed as an opportunity to negotiate with the creditors into the COVID era, especially where the creditors can negotiate with the promoters, and promoters have an opportunity to negotiate with the creditors, that how exactly are they willing to leverage their payments, especially in the instances of distress which have occurred. It is an unprecedented situation which should be has created a scenario where the parties are most likely to negotiate, because not everybody is likely to move against you, to take you to the court and seek a recovery action immediately. So that is the relativity of scheme of arrangement, the procedure of which is lies before the NCLT, and the scheme of arrangement can be initially approved by the board of directors, and thereafter we can propose it and before the shareholders, and after the resolutions have been passed, we can approach the NCLT with the NOCs of the creditors. Rather, I would say that under that NOC and with the scheme of arrangement which we approve, we can negotiate the terms of the payments with the creditors, which once approved by the creditors, the entire loan is reschemed. So that is one of the opportunities. Moving on to the next slide. It's a mechanism under the Negotiable Instrument Act 1881, which is available with the person who is holding a check or a promissory note from the person from which he is supposed to recover some money. Now, let us say that I owe some money to some other party and I have issued a check. Thereafter, I default in honoring the payment through check, and when the check is presented, it is either dishonored, or maybe I have stopped the payment, or maybe there can be a circumstance when I have issued a check as an advance of a payment. Now, under section 138, these are all total different circumstances, and it depends on from every case to case how exactly these complaints would be dealt with. However, a person who is holding a check in his favor has a admitted claim in his favor, and of course he can approach the concerned court with the complaint under section 138, where particularly he can seek the action to recover the admitted amount under the check, as well as penalty and also the interest. So moving on to the next slide please. So the procedure available, it's a traditional method of summary suit and recovery suit. If I have to recover some money from a party, then of course I have the right available with me is to file a suit for recovery. This traditional method was always available even in the era of the insolvency, particularly because the insolvency, however, enacted in December 2016, only fewer sections related to the recoveries against the corporate debtors, who are the entities in the form of a company, were available under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. However, there were certain sections which are yet to be enforced, which deal with the insolvency of the firms as well as individuals. But if you have a claim against the individuals or the firms other than a company, or any entity or a person other than a company, these traditional methods were still working fine, and these are the methods which are also available right now. So coming to the recovery suit, it's a traditional suit where once you file a suit for recovery before the relevant court, the trial takes place. The trial procedure is there, and thereafter you can get the amount awarded in your favor, which is, and thereafter once a decree is awarded in your favor, thereafter you can seek the execution. The similar procedure is in summary suit. Just an exception is there. The summary procedure is a very short procedure. In a summary suit, the major trial period is evicted, especially on the count that you have to prove to the court that the debt against which a summary proceedings are sought under Order 37 are in the nature of the admitted debt, and there is no defense, which practically lies with the defendant. A leave to defense is of course available, and there's a limited time which is given to the defendant, that is of 10 days as per the CPC norms. However, summary suit practically is a faster procedure when compared to insolvency courts as well, because what we have witnessed is that even in the insolvency proceedings, especially in the cases of section 9, the opposite side, which is the corporate debtor, is given an opportunity to prove that whether there is an existing dispute related to the claim filed by the operational creditor before the NCLT. So that deciding the dispute generally takes time, because there are the counsels and the dates are even due to the backlog of so many cases before NCLT. The next dates which are given are, let's say, 1.5 months. That again depends on the which court we have filed our case. However, moving to the next slide, please, is the law that deals with the micro, small and medium enterprises. Now, MSMEs have had a great opportunity for recovering their money due to the parties who have defaulted in their payments. The Act itself talks about the payment of interest if the payments of due to the MSMEs are delayed for more than 45 days. The Act simply talks about the interest 3 times the prevailing bank rate, which approximately amounts to 18% of the interest which is calculated above than the default amount. Now, how can one approach the appropriate authority, which is the MSME Facilitation Council under the MSME Act? The MSME, the person who has registered as a MSME has an online portal where the government has provided them the opportunity for filing a complaint under e-Samadhan, which is once the complaint is filed, the MSME entity receives a notification from the authority detailing their claim, and of course they issue the notice upon the person from which the claims are sought. However, the difficulty here is that it is better that one approaches to MSME after seeking the proper legal advice and filing a physical form of a application, through which an opportunity is created to present your case through a legal counsel. Then moving to the next slide, please. The alternate method, which was even prevailing during the insolvency bankruptcy code, available with the lenders who had secured their lending through some security was under the provisions of SARFAESI Act. Even the NCLT was initially in the initial time struggling to pass the orders for the admission, where the proceedings were taken ahead by the secured lenders under the SARFAESI Act against the defaulting corporate debtors. So, however, the law has crystallized over the evolution of the IBC code for past more than 3 years now, and more or less the lenders who are having the security at their hand can enforce their security interest under the provisions of Securities Securitization Act, SARFAESI Act, which now is available with the lenders, and I think, to my mind, would be followed with the diligence and more accuracy, since the fresh IBC proceedings for the COVID for the COVID period default have now been suspended for the limited time of 6 months, which may extend to 1 year, which the amendment proposes. Moving on to the next slide, please. The another option which is available with the home buyers for against the defaulting builders is filing a complaint under Real Estate Regulation Development Act, which is a state enactment and varies the jurisdiction of which varies from state to state. There are many states under which there is a proper real estate regulation authority which is taking up the cases. However, in states where the real estate regulation authorities have not been formed, the central government and the state governments have notified the governmental authorities and bodies who are taking up the cases of RERA. So the home buyers, we have witnessed that under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, the people who immediately started approaching were the home buyers, and due to the so many cases and the default of the builders, the companies who are engaged into real estate law practice, real estate business, they had defaulted on a huge account, and due to which there were certain amendments which were followed under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. And simultaneously, after the RERA enactment, the same home buyer had also approached the Real Estate Regulation Authority, under which he had obtained the order. So NCLT used to treat that order as the admission of the liability against the builder. However, having the present situation, after the amendment of the law applicable upon the home buyers, and the amendment which now imposes that minimum 100 home buyers on 10% in value are required to approach to NCLT. So there is a stricter and stringent compliance which needs to be done if one needs to approach to NCLT. The alternate method which is now available, and of course was previously also available, is to approach the Real Estate Regulation Authority, under which I believe the disposing time for the particular application before the RERA, as per the RERA Act, is 60 days, and if the RERA authorities goes beyond those 60 days, it has to record the reasons in writing. So Real Estate Regulation Authority is one of the options which the home buyers can definitely avail. Moving on to the next slide, please. So I would like to finish my discussion here with the alternate methods which are available. So one moot question which should follow is, of course, that whether these traditional methods are actually effective or not. Well, to my mind, answer to that question is it is effective, especially there are cases which are not covered under the IBC, which I dealt with, like that in the case of when the recovery is sought from the partnership firm or the individual person. So those cases would definitely fall under the alternate recovery mechanisms, as we have been filing the claims against those person in the relevant courts only. And so far as the present suspension of the insolvency is concerned, of course the traditional methods are there which can come to the rescue under the other applicable laws which I have recently discussed. Thank you so much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Karan. Thank you very much, Karan. So now Karan has given alternative. Manoj has given the because Madan, as per Manoj, the insolvency suspended, but you can file, even you can file cases. What are the cases which he has mentioned, that if it is default has taken place. Then Karan has given alternative remedies which were prevalent, because there is no other option but you have to go by these routes. So now come to the main person, who is on forefront to get the recovery from the corporate world, because SBI Bank was there and Mr. Prashad was Deputy Managing Director who has handled all these things. So I will request Mr. Prashad to share his view on the entire suspension of insolvency law and the alternative route. What are the things available? CDR, SDR, S4A, SURFACE, BRT, and so many things are there. And the new circular ICA, that what is all these things, how they can do. Over to Mr. Prashad, please.
Thank you, Pawan, for the introduction and inviting me for this webinar. It's a very important topic which we have been discussing today here. What I will do is in the next 15-20 minutes, which I will take, I will definitely put this topic from the perspective of a banker in two different buckets. The first bucket, I would like to take a few minutes to dwell upon the IBC guidelines as well as the recent ordinance particularly, and what is the effect of the recent ordinance, how is it going to impact the resolution, and next, what are the other alternatives available to the banking community. So starting with the IBC, of course, in the introduction, Pawan and Manoj has mentioned the reason for IBC being brought. In fact, it was one of the most anticipated law in our country, and the lenders, the creditors, all of us had been waiting for the enactment of this law, and finally, almost 3 years back, we had this IBC code. If you look back in the last 3 years since the code has been enacted, there has been a lot of learnings. I would not say that it has been an easy journey so far in terms of resolutions. First and foremost thing is that the code was not considered to be a mechanism for debt recovery. It was a debt resolution process. The second thing was that there was a maximization of value. That was the main objective of this code. The third, of course, it has to be a going concern. It has to be retained mostly as a going concern. But unfortunately, the major players in the entire activity construed this as a debt recovery mechanism. So initially, there had been a lot of teething troubles. Most of the banks did not get it right. They thought that this is like any other debt recovery mechanism. So the maximization of value and the resolution took a backseat. But thankfully, in the last 3 years, the learning which we all had changed the contours of the resolution or changed the contours of the code, and the IBC has been construed or is being looked forward by most of the creditors as a maximization of value and realization and resolution of assets. So in fact, if you look back in the particular case of Essar Steel, which all of us are very much aware, this law has been tested in every aspect. Every provision of the law has been questioned in every stage, whether it was in the NCLT, NCLAT, High Court, or even Supreme Court. All the provisions have been finally tested and certified. So we have been going ahead in the right direction when this unfortunate incident of COVID infection has come. And in fact, then the development of this new ordinance has happened. So if you look at the global situation also, it's not that only India has enacted this ordinance, wherein we have put certain restrictions or suspension of this code for a period of, initially for a period of 6 months, which is expected to be extended by another 6 months. Then the second change in increase in threshold. From earlier, 1 lakh default was enough to initiate the insolvency proceedings, but that has been increased to 1 crore. So if you look at the global practices, many other countries, many other developed countries also had done similar situations. For example, in UK, United Kingdom, they had temporarily banned the liquidation proceedings. In Singapore, they had increased the threshold. The Belgium, there is a moratorium on fresh insolvency proceedings. In Spain, they had put a moratorium. In Australia, they had increased the threshold from $2,000 to $20,000. So this is the background, because every country is concerned that they should protect their own companies, their own economy, their own assets. So this ordinance, 2020 ordinance, has to be seen in the light of this aspect, that the situation has created, the economic situation has worsened due to the COVID infections and the lockdown. And this is not a right time for a resolution or a recovery or whatever you think it. So that is the background in which this ordinance has been passed. One is basically increasing the threshold for default from 1 lakh to 1 crore rupees, and also temporarily suspending the default for filing of fresh cases for an initial period of 6 months commencing from 25th March 2020, may be extendable by another 6 more months. So when I look at this from a lender's or a creditor's perspective, you have to see this as it's a double-edged sword. Why I say it's a double-edged sword is that one way it is very important that we protect our companies, we protect our assets, we protect our economy, and I do also agree that this is not a time to initiate insolvency proceedings when the economy is having difficulties, and when we are not in a position to get resolutions, we will not be in a position to maximize the value. But why it is a double-edged sword? That when I say it's a double-edged sword, the reason is that there is a provision which states that any default which occurs from 25th March for the first 6 months may be extendable by another 6 months. For a lifetime, you cannot initiate a default, you cannot initiate a insolvency proceedings. This is very, very dangerous. This can be misused by certain malpractices or certain customers. How it can be used is that, like previously when there were default, these companies, they can keep the default which has been regularized over a period of time. They can keep the account under default during this period, so and get the escape from the position of filing in the insolvency proceedings against them. That is one way it can be misused. The second problem is that as all of us know that IBC code also has been effectively used mainly by small MSME companies as well as some of the operational creditors as a means to recover their dues from the large corporates who has been either delaying or refusing to pay the dues. So one way it will also impact the smaller MSMEs whom we are very particular to safeguard and protect from approaching the forum and getting it resolved. So Pawan has mentioned in the beginning that almost 27,000 cases had been filed and almost 50% of the cases have been resolved outside the court itself. These are mainly the cases where operational creditors, mainly our MSME customers, who had taken the large corporates to the insolvency and insolvency cases, and whereby the mere threat of insolvency initiation, the customers, the corporates had paid the dues and settled the matter then and there itself. So that way, I consider this as a double-edged sword, though it was very much warranted in the current situation, considering the economic difficulties we are passing through. This amendment or the ordinance was very, very warranted. The only catch here is that we have to use it very effectively and we have to see that it is not misused. Then coming back, what is next? What next for the creditors and especially the lenders? See, the one point we have to understand that this suspension of initiating insolvency proceeding coincides with the moratorium announced by Reserve Bank of India. So as all of us are aware, initially Reserve Bank of India has given a 3-month moratorium for all payments in respect of working capital loan, working capital interest, and also for deferment of interest and installment on term loan beginning from 1st March till 31st May, and subsequently it has been extended up to 31st August. So this provision of moratorium is available, and the suspension is more or less coinciding with this period, so that effectively there may not be a default, because many of the customers who are not having adequate cash flows will opt for the moratorium, resulting in situation that there may not be any default. So, but this option of moratorium is only available to entities governed by Reserve Bank of India. There are other entities who are not under the purview of Reserve Bank of India, who are also have exposure to the corporates, and they will find it very difficult to take these cases to the insolvency and bankruptcy, under insolvency and bankruptcy court, because of the ordinance. Now, say for example, if it is an insurance company or a mutual fund or any other agency which had not been governed by RBI, and if there is a default, they will find it difficult to resolve in the insolvency and under insolvency and bankruptcy court. So this particular aspect is only available, the moratorium coinciding with the moratorium is only mainly effective for the banks. And once the moratorium is lifted, and as it is anticipated that there will be a serious issue regarding the asset quality, then the banks also will find it difficult to take these companies under IBC for that particular period. If it is 6 months, it's 6 months. If it is beyond 6 months and extended by another 6 months, which is the most expected timeline, that is the major problem with this situation, problem with the structure. So what the lenders do now? See, what has been happening in India is that we have been trying with different types of law for resolution, recovery, and all. We have all the SIC companies, SICA Act, then we have the BIFR, then we have DRT, then we have SARFACI, then we have the CDR, and then SDR and S4A and all those things. All those things have been tried and tested, and if you look back in terms of the success rate under many of these things has not been very, very good. It was not at all encouraging. So though we have been able to save some provisions under a CDR structure or an S4A structure for a period of 1 or 2 years, ultimately all these assets which had inherent weaknesses had resulted in increase in the NPA percentage of the banks. So subsequently, the Reserve Bank of India initially came with a circular in 2012 February, which has been subsequently changed at the behest of the Supreme Court, and now you have a prudential regulation for resolution of stressed assets by the 7th June circular, prominently known as the 7th June 2019 circular, which is the basic principles governing the resolution of stressed assets outside IBC or outside NCLT. See, in the last 1 year or so, once this circular has been issued and these guidelines had made applicable to the agencies which are governed by Reserve Bank of India, I can say for sure that a lot of resolutions were undergoing under this structure. See, basically, this structure is very simple. It is a voluntary mechanism. It's a voluntary mechanism. So you have different categories of accounts which are categorized as SMA 0 to 2. So they are all the incipient sicknesses, the companies which are showing incipient sicknesses or difficulties in servicing their debt. They are classified based on the default period from 0 to 30 days as SMA 0, 31 to 60 days as SMA 1, and 61 to 90 days as SMA 2. So when you have this categorization, essentially you had to enter into an intercreditor agreement among the lenders community, and then within a maximum period of 30 days, you have to arrive at a kind of a resolution plan, and then implement within a period of 180 days from the review period. So maximum period of 180 days, you have to implement a resolution plan, voluntary resolution plan. So initially this was made applicable for aggregate exposures in excess of 2,000 crores from the banking system. And from 1st January 2020, this was brought down to be applicable for aggregate exposures in excess of 1,500 crores. As we speak, the current regulation states that all aggregate exposures from the banking system is over and above 1,500 crores that we brought under the ICA framework. See, we look back in this implementation of ICA during the last 1 year and the success. I can say, because this was the period when I was very actively involved in some of the larger resolutions in this country, and I had seen that the lenders had shown a lot of interest, because what was happening was that, like in the IBC process also, though there were initially 180 days extendable by 90 days as per the statute, and which was subsequently enhanced to a maximum period of 330 days, we had seen the cases taking 2 years, 3 years, and many cases are going for liquidation. So to that extent, to ensure that the lenders voluntarily thought that this framework under the prudential regulation under the guidelines of 7th June circular is a better mechanism where maximization of value can be achieved. So we have a lot of cases, I can say for sure, which has been resolved under the in the AGs and which is under implementation. So to quote one name, the recent we have which State Bank of India has been spearheading was the case of Altico, because this was a Mumbai-based NBFC which was defaulted, and the lenders initiated on September 12th when this company defaulted. Whereas aggregate exposure was around 6,500 crores. The lenders initiated almost, there were 33 lenders, including different hues, public sector banks, private sector banks, there were mutual funds, there are foreign equity funds, high net worth individuals. So we have been able to bring all these parties under the aegis of ICA, make them realize that that was the best. And we have been able to go through a process by virtue of which before end of 180 days, we have concluded a sale. And in this process, the realization to the secured creditors, the financial creditors, has been in the range. We had even given the same treatment to unsecured financial creditors also. So the same treatment, 76% recovery of the outstanding was assured under this transaction. Of course, this transaction is currently under implementation, and as I know, very recently they are awaiting the RBI's fit and proper guidelines, and in a month or two this will completely rectify and this will be implemented. So what I wanted to say in this context is that the 7th June circular and the framework has been very well tested. There have been a lot of incidents. One incident I quoted. I can quote many other incidents which have been right now being under implementation. The large case of Suzlon Industries, which is also being worked out under this framework, is approved by the lenders. It is awaiting implementation. We have other cases also which has been discussed and which is in the various stages of implementation. So for the lenders community, while there is a suspension in the initiating proceedings under the IBC right now, and which may continue for some time, the best option today is to strengthen and work under the ICA framework. That is one thing. See, one interesting thing which we have to notice is that, like, even though this IBC suspension is there for all defaults from 25th March, so I think the law is very clear that any default happened prior to 25th March, we can still file under IBC. You can go to the NCLT and then try your case there itself. So, but I don't know whether the banks are going to look at it in that context or not, or whether they will be attending this voluntary recovery, voluntary resolution under the intercreditor arrangement, which will be a much better option in the given scenario. That is my opinion. One more thing which was very important, which I think we didn't touch upon in the beginning of the topic, is that, like, when the IBC code was introduced, this section 29A, which prohibited promoters from bidding bidding has been introduced. Of course, this has been highly debated. There has been a lot of debate and ethical issues were raised. So I leave it as a question open to all, but in the current scenario, whether it is advisable to relook this provision or not. I am not giving you an opinion. I am only saying that whether it is an advisable to have a relook at this option of giving the promoters a chance for participating in the resolution. This is one very, very important question. Why I say is that in my experience, if you are the lenders are looking for a maximization of value, the promoters are the most important this thing. With a proper mechanism and wherein you segregate or separate the malified promoters and the criminal intent of the promoters and give an opportunity for the promoters. This is a question which needs to be discussed. This is a question which needs to be discussed. So this is one point to be kept in mind when we look at it. If the promoters are kept out of the purview of any restructuring or resolution in the current situation, the effective valuation, effective realization of value will come down, because the situation is such that we may not be able to find too many takers for these distressed assets in the current situation, and the cash flows are also coming down. And another aspect we have to keep it in mind is that we have been hearing a lot about a proposed one-time restructuring discussion at various stages. Of course, if somebody has been going through today's newspaper, the finance minister also has made a statement saying that they are in active discussion with the Reserve Bank of India on this context. And this has been highly anticipated that before the current Reserve Bank of India moratorium ends, there could be some kind of restructuring thrown in for the safety of these advances. Though I don't believe that RBI is going to dilute the existing provisions very, very dramatically, but I believe that they may be tweaking these existing guidelines to at least facilitate certain sectors which has been very highly impacted. Say, for example, maybe the aviation sector, or maybe the tourism and logistics sector, transport sector. I'm just guessing it. I don't know, because this is a point which is currently under discussion with the Reserve Bank of India and which is being debated very much in the public by a lot of interested persons, whether there will be going to be a one-time restructuring. If there is a possibility of a one-time restructuring happens, I think that will be one saving grace for the banking community. If that is going to be one saving grace, then of course the second thought also is whether the period for default for classification as an NPA, whether it will be increased from 90 to 180 days. I don't think RBI is going to agree for such grave or strange or large scale changes. Maybe some minor tweaking in respect of restructuring they may permit. That is my thought. And so these are the thoughts basically, and what will be life in respect of resolution post this 2020 ordinance from the point of view of a lending community or the banking community. I'm prepared to take any questions in this regard, or we can also have some more discussions on some important developments which happened in this period also. Pawan.
Thank you, Mr. Prashad. Very nicely and depth information about the inside of the banking sector. Thank you very much for this. Now, friends, after the discussion of all three speakers and after their presentation, we have received various questions, and I am taking questions one by one. So we have received question on insolvency, alternative route, and the banking sector. I'll start first question which I have received from Mr. Prashad. Is there any policy which is adopted by banks for entering into intercredit loan agreement?
Or an intercreditor agreement for resolution? Yes. Yeah.
So is there any policy adopted by bank?
Policy?
So the question is, sir, is there any policy which is adopted by banks for entering into intercreditors loan agreements? Any policy they
Intercreditor
have
loan
taken?
agreement.
Yeah.
Intercreditor loan agreement. Okay.
Yeah.
See, as I was mentioning, the 7th June circular of 2019 is the current regulation available for resolution of stressed assets in the country. All the earlier regulations regarding CPR, S4A, SDR, all have been subsumed into these guidelines. So under these guidelines, when there is an incipient sickness, when you notice the sickness or when you notice the default, you are mandatorily required to enter into an intercreditor agreement among the lending community. So it involves all the agencies governed by Reserve Bank of India. So this is another problem which the lenders are facing. Say for example, a large corporate who has got 30-40 different lenders, maybe 10 are public sector banks, 15 are private sector banks, there may be some foreign banks, maybe some NBFCs or housing finance companies, small finance banks, all of them which are under the purview of RBI, they are mandatorily required to get into an intercreditor agreement and initiate the process of resolution. But unfortunately, other creditors like mutual fund, insurance, National Housing Bank, these are governed by different regulatory agencies and they are not, it is not mandatory for them to join it. In fact, when we were attending a resolution of a large NBFC, which is now gone to NCLT, that itself was a first in the case, Diwan Housing. So this was the biggest demand we have. We have around 65 different types of lenders, insurance companies, mutual funds. They were governed by SEBI. Then insurance companies were governed by IRDA. NHB was, there are pension funds which are governed by PFRDA. So these agencies are not mandatorily required to sign ICA. So we had a problem. So we have been in touch with the Reserve Bank and SEBI to permit these companies also, these agencies also to join the ICA framework and come under the same ambit of resolution. Unfortunately, that has not happened. If you look at one more thing which I should tell at this point is that ICA framework is mandatory. Though it is applicable for the aggregate exposure of 1500 crores, today banks are following the spirit. Even though it is if it is a 100 crore or a 200 crore exposure, the banks are following the same spirit of ICA guidelines and going ahead with the resolution as permitted under the 7th June circular.
Okay. Manoj, if somebody has initiated the IBC proceeding against corporate debtor before COVID-19, amount is 50 lakh rupees. Can he continue to pursue that case?
Yes, I think we can refer to judgment of the exam where NCLT Kolkata bench has held that this is not a retrospective amendment, and the cases which are already filed before any of the benches of NCLT could be considered. So yes, logically there is no provision of retrospective amendment of threshold. So 24th of March is the cutoff date. If something is already filed before that date, then the threshold was only 1 lakh rupees, and the case is eligible to be admitted.
Okay. What is the justification for inclusion of provision? Inclusive of the provision, that is, no application shall ever be filed for default occurred during 6 months period in new section 10A. This question is I'm asking. Shad, you can add because you have mentioned that people can misuse it. So Manoj, what is the logic?
So logic is simple. If the default is because of COVID, then it should not be a cause of insolvency. That is the primary motive, and hence this section was brought 10A through ordinance. So if default is prior to 25th of March, which is the lockdown date, then it is admissible anytime up to the limitation period of 3 years generally, or such other period as per the Limitation Act. But if it is case, because if default happens after the lockdown period and remain when the insolvency remain under suspension for 6 months or 1 year, whatever the case may be, then that portion of default would not be counted for any proceedings under insolvency law. That is the purpose. The whole purpose is to give protection for default.
Pavan, let
Okay,
me
but-
add this. When I said that this provision can be misused, the ordinance, what I meant is that a company which has got the capability to service that loan in normal course and which they have been doing, if they decide to default willfully, they decide to do willfully default from 25th March, assuming that 6 months or extendable by another 6 months, you have no option. You have no option to take them to an insolvency court after the expiry of this 1 year also. This is a lifetime benefit. I understand that this is a lifetime benefit. And he can own after expiry of this period of suspension, he can regularize the account. He can still regularize the account with the default of that period.
Right.
So this is where the misuse can be happening, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Manoj, do you think suspension of IBC would be a setback for recovery of loans which has been disbursed? I think Mr. Prasad, you can give answer. Do you think suspension of IBC would be setback?
Like as I mentioned, Pavan, this was a very well anticipated law in the country. In fact, this has really taken our ease of doing business in the country from multiple notches also. And it was almost coming to a stable cycle, because when the law was introduced, nobody knew what is the basis, and it was not even tested in India. So in the last 3 years, each and as I mentioned, each and every section of the code has been tested and certified. There was no ambiguity anymore. There was no ambiguity anymore, and the law was coming into its own. And in fact, it was also creating a kind of fear among the corporate debtor also, that in case he is not behaving properly, he may lose the business. The biggest case was the SR case. They had touched upon every agency in the country and they took it, but unfortunately the law prevailed finally and it was tested. So it was coming into that same track, and now sudden this break, it may have, only history can say how it behaved subsequently. And at this point in time, we also really don't know what is going to be the real impact of COVID and lockdown on our economy also. It's a very uncertain period. So we cannot predict what will be the larger impact on this thing. So the lockdown has been removed, but I don't know whether it is really fully effective, the unlock. And second thing, of course, when this thing can be only, whether it has been any impact on our recovery and resolution, it can only be said after a year or two of from now.
Okay, Karan, MSME, is the decision of MSME Facilitation Center binding on both parties?
Yes, sir, it is. So once the decision is there, it can be enforced as a decree. It is binding on both the parties.
Okay, Manoj, why does the committee of creditor not include operational creditor? What is the rationale behind such exclusion?
The law is very clear that the operational creditors are very small in and they are not capable enough to handle the resolution. The purpose is not the recovery and hence the maximization of recovery, but the purpose is to have good resolution and maximization of value. So I think as per the committee report also, the purpose was clearly written that institutional lenders are in a better position to resolve the insolvency and maximize the value for everyone. And so they have been given a certain protection, and when there is no other financial creditor, then only operational creditors are forming part of the COC.
Okay. Now, friends, all three panelists, I will request all of you, because we have received various questions. So please be brief for your answer, because we have so many questions and we have to reply. Now, Manoj, another question. If operational creditor is unable to send its claim to IRP after publication of notice due to unavoidable circumstances, whether such delay can be waived off to allow him to submit his claim after the period ends?
Yes, I think it can easily be admitted, and generally it is happening that on the real-time basis the claims are verified and additional claims are admitted by the resolution professionals till resolution application start coming.
Okay, can a company file for bankruptcy for claim under rupees 1 crore? If yes, then under which forum? Karan, if
Yes,
my
sir.
claim is
Yes, sir. The Companies Act provides for the voluntary liquidation. I believe this question is coming for a claim for a bankruptcy to be filed by the company itself. So that is their voluntary liquidation procedure is there under the Companies Act. The rules have been recently notified.
No. This question is: can a company file for bankruptcy for claim under ₹1 crore? So you mean to say?
I'll just correct the question. Maybe a person is willing to ask that: can we go against a company if a claim is less than 1 crore?
Yes, that is the question, I think.
So for the relevant period, the NCLT forum is not available since the amount of claim is less than 1 crore. However, the other forums are available.
So what are the forum? That's the question.
The different courts, if the circumstances warrant and the evidence is there, then one can approach the summary suit through a summary suit to the civil court. However, there will be a cost implication because the suit requires 1% of the claimed amount to be deposited as the court fee. So one can.
Okay, Manoj, you have mentioned that in the NCLT is taking the cases. Somebody is asking, when the IBC is suspended for an initial period of 6 months, how does the NCLT have jurisdiction to try cases filed under IBC?
The protection under the ordinance is given for default happening on or after 25th of March. So if the default period is before that date, then the cases can still be initiated. And there are more than, I think, 4,000 old cases which are pending before NCLT with different benches. So whatever the cases are coming, and if the NCLT feels that it is an urgent matter, they are hearing. Presently, they are not functioning fully, but whenever they get opportunity, they handle a few of the cases which are in final stage.
Okay, Mr. Prashad, a writ relating to waiver of the interest component for lockdown period is pending before Supreme Court. Do you think any waiver coming for the benefit of the companies? Because banks are saying
this is under this thing, Supreme Court this thing, and I may not be able to comment because the banks have gone on record, the IB has gone on record. What is the reason why it cannot be done? So I don't think this can be answered.
I think, sir, a matter is pending before Supreme Court. And RBI has already represented that it will be a big burden on the financial service sector. So let's see what final call comes from Supreme Court.
Okay, Manoj, the provision under Section 29A of the Code, does it apply to only SME promoter or all promoters?
It is applicable to all other than SME promoters. MSME, the entities which are registered as MSME, their promoters and connected persons are exempted from this provision of 29A. All other persons are have to check this, becoming eligible.
Okay. Manoj, what is your position personal guarantor under IBC 2020 ordinance? Is there any change in personal guarantor?
No, personal guarantors are not exempt, and there is no change in position. But right now the insolvency for personal guarantor is not yet fully functional. It is with respect to only those corporate debtors which are already admitted. For them, insolvency can be initiated. Bankruptcy can be initiated.
Okay, Karan, if a real estate company under scrip, if resolution plans were voted and is against the resolution plan, can an RP call another COC meeting on the request of home buyers?
So it depends. As my co-panelist, Mr. Manoj Kumar has discussed an order where even the resolution plan was allowed to be revised. So it depends entirely on the circumstances whether the present resolution plan is in a position to cater to the interest of all the creditors, and also depends whether the plan already, if approved at all. I'm going beyond the question. If already plan has been approved, that is capable of being performed due to the COVID-19 scenario.
Okay, Manoj and Karan and other people, there's a very interesting question people are asking, that I have suppose a creditor initiated alternative remedies during that period. Can he go back to the insolvency after the opening of the insolvency process?
Yes, if the default period is before 25th of March and he is eligible because of the default size of 1 crore, then yes, he can.
The question is that somebody has defaulted, I have filed alternative remedies, and when the insolvency process again re-established, then I can go back to the insolvency by withdrawing my case there.
It is not about the withdrawal. It can happen simultaneous also, and then it becomes, if it is admitted, then the SARFAESI and other action get stayed. But till the time it is alive, it can be applied. Application can be made, but the condition is the default period should be before 25th of March and after the suspension is over. Any period after or before that.
Sir,
One addition here, Pavan. One addition here is Pavan. He has gone under any other act during the default happened during the suspension period, and after the suspension period is lifted, and if there is a fresh default, as per the threshold, then only he can do it. Otherwise, I don't think he can do it.
So the limitation period extends for the period on which I was taking the action. That is one. Apart from that, the one thing which we need to take care of is that the alternative remedy will involve the pleadings from both the parties. There might be a plausible dispute. The other party might be able to show the NCLT after we go to NCLT, after this ban is lifted. Then they might be able to show that there is an existing dispute. This specifically applies in the case of operational creditors.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it mandatory to pass resolution for liquidation after the resolution plan is voted out and liquidator is appointed by COC, Manoj?
Yeah, it is a normal provision that when within 180 days, which is the resolution period, if no resolution is happening, then it has to be mandatorily shifted to liquidation, unless the COC demands for additional time and grace is time period is 90 days is extended, up to 90 days is extended by NCLT. So the automatic fallout is the company will go into liquidation if nothing is happening.
Okay, Mr. Prashant, do you think that during the suspension period of IBC of COVID-related defaults, bank financial institution would restore to the revival structuring mechanism under the RBI norms?
Yes, they can. Bank can do that.
Okay. Okay. What is the resource available for the developer promoter if the home buyers fails to pay the installment due to COVID current?
So they can also seek the recovery under the relevant court. Of course, they can also approach RERA. The RERA works both ways.
Okay. There are some few questions on the summary recovery. Karan, what is the difference between summary suit and recovery suit? Short, please tell us.
Sir, briefly, in summary suit, generally the leave to defend is very given to the defendant for a limited time for the period of 10 days. However, in a suit, he generally has a leave to defend. So that's the basic difference. However, there is one more important difference which I would like to highlight, which is that in the case of summary suit, you go for a liquidated damages, the identified amount. However, under a suit, you can claim the further damages as well.
Okay, Karan, what is the court fees for summary suit?
So 1% it is in Delhi. However, depends from state to state. It is 1% of the claimed amount.
And how much time it takes to settle this?
So summary suit generally is decided within 6 to 8 months, which practically can be said that IBC applications were taking more time than that. However, the civil recovery suit depends entirely upon the court procedure.
And what is the pecuniary jurisdiction?
So the pecuniary jurisdiction below 2 crores, the district courts are there, and above than 2 crores amount, the high courts are there for the suits.
Do you think this is better than the IBC, or the IBC is better?
It depends against which entity are we going forward. As I explained during my speech, that in case we have to recover money from a partnership firm or the proprietorship firm, the IBC mechanism is doesn't come to my rescue. So in that case, of course, this is the only opportunity which is available with me.
The basic difference is also that the purpose of insolvency is not to recover. Resolution and maximization of value.
Can a bank ask the director, relative, or his HUF to clear debts loan of the company in which he is a director?
If there is a personal guarantee, then yes, otherwise not.
Okay. Prashad sir,
Yeah.
we heard that bank was discussing suspension of IBC proceeding against the existing cases prior to amendment was introduced. Do you think it is right? Because bank are discussing suspension of IBC proceeding where you have filed earlier and you want to give some relaxation to them so they can settle.
So that already there is a provision before admission or after admission with 90% of the creditors agreeing, you can withdraw the case. So that
Yes.
provision is already there.
Yes, section 11,
Okay.
12A was introduced for
Yes.
this purpose.
Okay. Karan, government is proposing decriminalization of 138. What do you feel?
Sir, presently no comments on that because let's see how it is being promoted and how and what exactly comes down. However, it will be a welcome move, especially because there are certain cases where actually the payments are being stopped by the issuer of the check in relevant circumstances. However, the law under 138 is quite simple. If I have a check, then of course I have a recovery against you.
Okay, Manoj, what is
Yeah.
under which forum can a company now file bankruptcy if not NCLT?
So the question I think is not correct. NCLT is not functioning. That is the temporary phenomena, and insolvency law is not going anywhere. It is there. Only there is a protection for a period, limited period of 6 months or maximum 1 year, which is given through this ordinance. So for all past defaults, banks or any operational creditor, if he is eligible, can go to NCLT right now also.
Okay. Manoj, can a company now file the bankruptcy, especially where the default payable are below 1 crore, since now they would not anymore be able to file insolvency as a corporate debtor under Section 10? Because now Section 10 is, so he can go to
voluntarily admission for voluntary admission also the default is necessary, and default of 1 crore is the eligibility criteria. So if the 1 crore rupees default is there, then only the company can approach NCLT under Section 10.
okay, one person has asked NCLT, can I go to NCLT for 21 lakh default done before 25th March? Answer is yes. Yes, he has already declared. It is stated that the interest is,
it is already not, they have not gone already, then they cannot go now.
no, if the default is old.
Even then you cannot go. The eligibility criteria will be tested at the time of filing of the application.
So the point is, if your default is older, number one, and it should be more than 1 crore, then you can file.
Sir, the default, if it is older, of course, the 1 crore limit is not available. But the question here is to determine the default. Now, let us say this gentleman who has asked the question is having the claim as an operational creditor. So, for the purpose of operational creditor, you have to mandatorily issue the demand note. Now, there can be a case that he has issued a demand notice already, but he is yet to file an application. So, in my considered opinion, he can of course approach the NCLT if he has issued the notice and the default has occurred. However, if you have not triggered the default, however, NCLTs will definitely come with an explanation upon this. We might see in coming days.
Mr. Prashad, is the interest is also under moratorium? Does it also cover credit card dues as well? So
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Even
okay.
credit card companies also had been asking for you to opt in or opt out for moratorium.
Moratorium, yes.
Okay. Mr. Prashad, what is your opinion? The banks are under stress, no doubt on NPA. But simultaneously, government is also proposing that you should settle and companies should go in going concern basis. So which is the best method banks are adopting to revive the industry? One is you can go to the insolvency and take over, somebody can take over. One is without going to insolvency, what are the best options you think the banks are successful and they are taking?
Yeah, I had mentioned also that if you ask the banks, particularly from based on the experience under IBC and other ways, especially the 7 June circular, The maximum opinion is in favor of a voluntary resolution under the prudential guidelines of 7th June of RBI. Because what we had seen it is that it is voluntary, it is time bound. You have 180 days to complete the process, and also maximization value happens. And the reason is that if you are not able to conclude the resolution within 180 days, there is an added need to increase your provisions. For the next 180 days, if you are going to resolve, you have to add that 20%. If it's another 180 days, you have to add another 15%. So total 35% provision comes. So for a banker's perspective, a voluntary resolution is the best. But the problem is that other agencies are not part of this regulation. Agencies which are not covered by RBI, so they may not participate in that. So the success of this resolution under this process happens only if you are able to bring all the other entities also under the same thing. So there was a talk of a super regulator coming into the area of to have a uniform approach in such situations. So because SEBI is regulating mutual funds, IRDA is regulating insurance companies, PFRDA is regulating pension funds, so RBI is regulating the rest of the agencies. So you have to have some concrete regulator or a structure by which all these agencies can come into picture. I think that will take the cake out of all this.
Okay, friends. Now rapid round, and I have to take 10 questions asked. So you have to give yes and no and quick move on. Now, Manoj, can a bank ask the director relatives his HUF to clear debts loan of the company in which he is a director? This question somebody is asking again because he was not clear.
So I am saying if they have the individuals have given their personal guarantee, then only bank can ask. Otherwise, there is no purpose. They are two different entities and cannot be claimed.
Okay, current summary suit can be filed only if the lender has check bounce under the Negotiable Instrument Act. Karan, your voice.
I'm sorry, am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
So the answer to that question is that I need to have evidence against the issuer or against whom the claim is made that he has no defense available and the debt has been admitted. So that can be through a check.
Okay. Prasad sir, what assets are covered under SARFAESI?
Pardon?
What assets are covered under SARFAESI?
I think Manoj or Karan will be the right person to answer this, because
sir, all kind of movable and immovable assets are which are given as a security are practically covered under the SARFAESI proceedings.
Okay, short answer, Karan. Can a guarantor's personal property be proceed against under SARFAESI?
Sir, yes. Only the security given as a guarantee can be proceeded with.
Okay, what are the remedy available to borrower upon possession being taken within and what time frame?
I'm sorry?
What is the remedy available to the borrower upon possession being taken over within that taken over? And within what time frame?
The borrower can always approach the DRT under the securitization application, section 17 of the Act.
Okay, what is the difference between RDDB and FI Act and SARFAESI Act?
Sir, the difference is, of course, the recovery SARFAESI comes into picture where there is the secured asset, and the remaining acts are for the recoveries for the banks and financial institutions. Of course, if I am having a security and I am a financial institution or a bank, I would choose the SARFAESI first, which is the quicker resolution.
Okay, can I file the bank can file simultaneously RDDB and FI and with SARFAESI Act simultaneously?
Sir, the question should be rather that if I have a recovery done from the SARFAESI, can I go for the remaining recovery for under the other laws? Answer is yes.
Whether criminal and civil case can be filed simultaneously in 138?
Yes, sir, settled law.
Okay, whether check of punishable offense?
Yes, sir, it is. 2 years punishment is there.
Okay. How long does it take to decide the application before MSME Council?
So it depends. There's a timeline provided under the MSME Act. However, again, it's an indicative timeline. The timeline provided is 90 days.
Okay. Sir, last 2 minutes to all the 1 minute to all participants. Mr. Prashad, can you summarize something relating to this? What is the happening and what are the things? 1 minute each for all 3 participants, then we can close.
See, Pavan, to say simply, all over the world, and we particularly are passing through more difficult times. At this point in time, we really don't know what is going to be the economic impact on our economy and the existing companies, how the business will pan out once the moratorium is lifted, once the lockdown is lifted and all. So we are only anticipating that once the moratorium is lifted, there is going to be further stress coming out. That's the anticipation. Various agencies are also predicting that the GDP of the country will go by negative. There will be a negative growth, and there will be a subsequent recovery and all. So definitely there will be stress in the economy. There will be stress for our companies, and there will be problems for the lenders. So we have to be very well prepared to handle this kind of stress going forward, whether it is the IBC code or the voluntary resolution or a one-time restructuring or a combination of these things only will save. Especially we need to protect our MSMEs. We have to be very liberal at this point in time to ensure that these vulnerable entities are protected. I think the country needs to protect these entities, and we are a capital scarce country. We need to have a combination of all those things: IBC, voluntary resolution, restructuring, and then only we will be able to surmount the problem.
Okay. Manoj, any point you want to cover?
Yeah, I think sir has very rightly said that everything is how long this COVID problem will remain, and what will be the actual impact on the economy and the business. So the various projections are coming. Some is saying that there will be U-shaped recovery. Some saying V-shaped recovery. So it all depends what happens to the economy, and if that is happening. But one thing is that resolution will have to happen, because there will be stress in many of the companies. Banking sector needs protections, so it cannot be left fully, and IBC will not go fully. So I think the discussion with respect to pre-packaged insolvency is very good. It will help to resolve the cases which are not getting resolved under the framework of RBI under 7th June. So all those things will happen, and I think that will the system will evolve.
Okay, Manoj, thank you very much. I think the crux is that bank is also thinking that how to help the industry. Industry should also work out that how to take the maximum advantage of this period where they have a breathing space and they can work out the new strategy. SEBI is also giving so many relaxation to the listed companies promoter. They can infuse fund, and without going to the insolvency, they can bring the investor. Now, all these things are good for the entire corporate world, and this is the time then when the atmosphere is negative but simultaneously positive for helping business. So we must take advantage of this situation. Everybody should realize that how he can survive himself, how he can bring out the new ideas, new things, and new type of money. Every regulator is helping. Every banking sector is also happy, and simultaneously other co-business person is also realizing, and they are also giving full type of relaxation. This is the time that everybody should work out. Alternative remedies available, that is there, but that is a time consuming. People have tested the blood of insolvency law effectiveness and easy and the fast, so they will try to compare with this. So this is the time you should do this. So I think I thanks all 3 panelists that they have rightly discussed all these questions, and Mr. Prashad especially I am thankful to you. You are my alma mater senior, and on my one request you have come for the program. Thank you very much, Mr. Prashad, for joining us, and thank you, Manoj and Karan, for giving answer. Friends, we have tried to give all the answers, but any answer is unanswered or you are not clear, you send an email to us. We will give reply to all the answers which is pending or which is not clear to you. And with this, we will close this session by this one announcement, that we are organizing next webinar on Friday. That is on 3rd July on insider law, all practical aspects, because all these programs we are organizing on the basis of public demand, which we are asking people. And then 10th Friday, 10th July, we are organizing best time for deals, another program. And 17th July, Friday, we are organizing program of family settlement. That there are so many disputes going on in the various families. So how to settle, what are the practical issues. And then next Friday, after this around 24th July, we are having a program on CSR, because there are so many issues are coming in CSR that we are organizing. So thank you all the participants. They have participated, they have asked the questions, they have patiently heard all the panelists, and thank you very much for your support. This support gives encouragement to us to organize more and more knowledge session for the benefit of our professionals friend, for our corporate friend, and to create the clarity, bring out the more issues and settle these issues. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Prashad, Manoj, Karan. Thank you all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you.